Dickinson's 465. I heard a fly buzz when I died. The stillness in the room was like the stillness in the air between the heaves of storm. The eyes around had wrung them dry, and breaths were gathering firm for that last onset when the king be witnessed in the room. I willed my keepsakes, signed away what portion of me be assignable, and then it was there interposed a fly, with blue, uncertain stumbling buzz between the light and me, and then the windows failed, and then I could not see to see. So let's go through our analysis. We want to know, first of all, who is the speaker of 465, and we can gather this is a dying person. What is the rhetorical situation? This dying person is on his or her deathbed, at home, surrounded by family and friends. Right? The eyes around had wrung them dry. Who is the audience? The audience does not seem to be the loved ones, but a general audience. There are no personal relationships or shared memories invoked. The tone of the poem is distant. It's not overtly emotional. There is no feeling of mourning or loss. In fact, there's no feeling of fear of death. What is the tone? The tone has the distance of scientific writing. The speaker is treating the experience of dying as if it were being looked at in a lab or under a microscope. It is pure observation, without emotion, detached. What are the organizational features that establish the pattern of the poem? For example, meter, rhyme, related imagery, narrative chronology. The meter of 465 is that of a hymn, which is very close to a ballad. It's an alternating tetrameter and trimeter pattern, which is to say the first line is 4 feet or 8 syllables, the second line is 3 feet or 6 syllables, and the pattern repeats 4-3, 4-3, 4-3. The rhyme scheme is also typical of hymns and ballads, XA, XA, X standing in for whatever happens to be there. But A and A, lines 2 and 4, always repeat. Always rhyme. Each of the 4 quatrains, a quatrain, by the way, is a knit together portion of a poem, and it's knit together because of a rhyme pattern. So each of the 4 quatrains in the poem share this rhyme scheme. Specifically, room rhymes inexactly with storm, firm with room, and be with fly. Me and see is exact rhyme. So inexact rhyme, slant rhyme, it's the same thing. It's an almost but not quite rhyme. Me and see is an exact rhyme. So that's kind of the form of it. Hymns and ballads are both lyric forms, most familiar forms to most people, from popular songs and children's rhymes. The choice of form makes the poem seem familiar and accessible. The regularity of the meter, pardon me, and the rhyme are pleasant and comforting. Imagery. The first image is a fly buzz, a sound, familiar and irritating, but also suggestive of death, since flies are attracted to death, to rot. So it introduces the theme of death, yet the fly is buzzing, which assures readers that it is alive. It's a little bit of a contrast. The second image is the still room, which tells the readers that those present are awaiting a death. They are expectant, they are respectful. Still is juxtaposed in that stanza with heaves of storm. Since the rhetorical situation is a deathbed scene, readers can see heaves of storm as a metaphor for the loud wails of people in mourning. More imagery. Eyes wrung dry. That would be the mourners who have expended their tears, at least for a time. The third stanza points to the speaker's action and away from the sensory stimuli of the first 2 stanzas. This stanza gives a bit longer sense of a timeline, a larger view of the scene. The speaker's will has been recorded, and just then the speaker becomes aware of the fly that readers were introduced to in line 1. The final stanza concludes the poem with the speaker's fading perception. The fly comes between the speaker and the light, which likely literally means that the speaker can see as well as hear the fly, and that the fly is between the speaker and the bedroom window, light coming in through the window. Where windows is capitalized, the readers must ask, how can a window fail? And the readers are forced to interpret this image as another metaphor. You may be familiar with the old cliche, the eyes are the windows to the soul. It's a very old expression and one that comes to mind. Windows, the reader concludes, is the eyes. So the windows are failing, eyes are failing. The last line of the poem is the most interesting one. I could not see to see. It's an ending that surprises readers. Could equals ability, but see to see, what does that possibly mean? At the end of the action of seeing, right, is the organ of perception. That's the eyes. But how do eyes see? Well, dead eyes see nothing because the brain is dead, too. The brain must be alive for the eyes to see. Thus, readers are forced to separate the eyes and the brain to analyze this line, that the brain enables seeing. The brain, in fact, makes meaning out of the image that is brought into the brain through the eyes. What do Dickinson's poems tell readers about her understanding of nature? In 465, the natural objects are the fly and the light. They are perceived by the speaker. Metaphorically, they could represent the speaker's life and death, as well as life and death more broadly, which is to say all living things die, and this is natural. And what does this say about her understanding of the place of human beings in nature? Well, Dickinson's take on nature in this poem would seem to be an all-encompassing nature, a nature that governs human life. The life of all living beings are governed by nature. Humans belong to nature. And this is one of the romantic ideas, that the universe is one, and human beings are part of this nature. Does it say anything about Dickinson's take on art? Well, Dickinson's work rarely foregrounds art as her topic. You will not see her writing poems about Grecian urns, for example, or paintings. In the places that Dickinson does talk about art, it's poetry that she's talking about. So we can move to the next question. What does the poem tell us about Dickinson's understanding of human anatomy in the brain? Her division of seeing with the eyes and seeing with the brain forces readers to consider the modern idea that all perception and presumably consciousness are seated physiologically in the brain. And this puts her, of course, at odds with your 17th century philosophers who argue that consciousness extends beyond. It's kind of a John Locke idea that human consciousness is not limited by the limits of the body. So what does this tell us about Dickinson's understanding of human consciousness? Dickinson was a student of human anatomy, and she can demonstrate how the seat of human consciousness is locked in the brain, and how once that brain ceases to function, consciousness ceases to exist. Arguably, the view of consciousness presented in 465 is post-romantic because it shows consciousness as finite, as limited to the life of the body, as mortal. Now I say arguably, of course, because we can take positions on this, and we can make arguments, interpretations about the poem. But I think that it is interesting to look at 465 in particular in this way, because it is one of those that really does foreground perception as a function of consciousness. So, there you go.